Okay, once again, I welcome you all to this learning clinic, proudly brought to you by the Let's Connect team, with collaboration efforts of the Igbo Wikimedia User Group, Wikimedia Community User Group Uganda, and Wikimedia South Africa. Next slide, please. Okay, and the title of this clinic is Copyright Reform, What's Happening in Uganda, South Africa, and Nigeria. Excellent. And these are the amazing, beautiful faces of our sharers. On the first, we have Ceslause Ogbonnaya. He's an executive director for the Wiki Indaba Steering Committee, WISCom, and also a member, an experienced Wikimedian from the Igbo Wikimedia User Group. And the next pretty face is no other than the face of Sandra Aceng. And Sandra is an executive director of WorkNet, and she's also an experienced Wikimedian member of the Wikimedia User Group, Uganda. We also have Sipho, McDonald, Fako, is a Wikimedian from Wikimedia South Africa. And that's the beautiful faces, amazing faces of our sharers. Now, I would just like to run through the agenda for today. I am currently doing the Let's Connect introduction, and it's meant to last for 5 minutes. So if I exceed 5 minutes, do well to interrupt me. And we'll also have an icebreaker for 10 minutes. We'll have the first discussant, Ceslause Ogbonnaya, share on copyright reform, specifically in Nigeria. And then we have the second discussant, Sandra, who is also going to share on the copyright reform in Uganda. And then finally, we'll have Sipho Fako, who is going to share on the copyright reform in South Africa. And once they are done sharing all of their insights as it relates to the copyright reform and why we are here, the next steps that we need to take, we'll then have a special Q&A session, which is going to last for 20 minutes. And then finally, we'll close out with a feedback from everyone on this call on how we can improve our future clinics. So that's about the agenda. Now, for some of you who are just joining this call for the first time, this clinic is proudly brought to you by the Let's Connect Peer Learning Program, which is a joint initiative between the Wikimedia Foundation and communities. Okay. Oops, sorry. Yeah, so please, can you go back? Sorry for the distraction. Oops. Can we go back to the slide that has... Okay, so yeah, so would have Sandra come last as a discussant and have Sipho. Sorry for that mix up. Yeah, so for those of you that are just joining this call for the first time, this program is proudly brought to you by the Let's Connect Peer Learning Program team. And it's a joint initiative between the Wikimedia Foundation and Wiki community. And as always, we are here to have a good time. We want to make you feel comfortable and confident. And we believe that everyone has something to learn, to share, no matter the experience. So with this, we'll go to the next slide. Now, we are most particular about your safety on this call, and to ensure that we better support you adequately, we have this call is supported by the Trust and Safety Guide. If you would want to reach out to any of the team, I mean the Let's Connect team, please, you'll find the LC beside their names at the top. So you can reach out to any of us that have the LC. So LC means Let's Connect. And please feel free to share whatever concerns you have as regard your safety. However, please note this call is under the Trust and Safety Guides, and we do well to observe it always. Now, why are we here today? You may wonder. We are here because this session is designed for Wikimedians like you, and because, most importantly, we are here to understand how policy and advocacy operates within the Wikimedia movement. And finally, we want to be updated on the state of copyright reform in Uganda, Nigeria, and South Africa. Next slide. So some of the learning outcomes at the end of this clinic, we would want to expect that you have a better understanding of how you can contribute to policies and advocacy documents within the movement, and also gain insights into how you can build or participate in a cross-country Wikimedia copyright coalition, especially as it focuses on public interest. So it's very important. And finally, we want to believe that at the end of this clinic, you will have strategies for how to anticipate and respond to copyright reforms affecting the various Wikimedia projects or activities that you run within your region. So those are the learning outcomes. Next step. Next slide. Yeah, so with this, I'll pass it back to Justice, who is going to take the icebreaker. He's going to be leading us on an interesting icebreaker. So let's break the ice.
Hi everyone. So if you can see my screen, there's a QR code that you can scan. There's also a link that will be pasted in the chat, which contains the icebreaker. So let's see how many people join the code, and then we can proceed. We have two people. Can somebody put the link to the QR code in the chat? I can't do so for my end. Thank you, Cassie.
Justice, when I click on the link, it oh, joined. Okay, all good.
Yeah. We have 3 people, 4 people now, 7, 8. We have 9. We are about 28 on the call, so let's get to 20 and then we can begin. 14. Okay, so I think we can move on now. So the first question is, what country are we joining us from for today's call? It would be great to understand the dynamics that we have on the call for this session. Say Uganda, Nigeria, Prague. Guinea, South Africa, United States. Any more people? Cote d'Ivoire, interesting. There are more people typing, so let's wait for the Mali. Okay, so let's move to the final question. Madagascar. Oh, nice. So the final question is, what copyright reforms exist within your respective countries? This is important to sort of understand what is going on within your respective countries if you know them, and then what are some of the um, like the activities that is happening. And moving when the presenters start presenting, we can all understand how the processes are working and also how best we can come together to collaboratively deal with some of these issues. I'm seeing a lot of people typing, so let's wait to see what they say. But so if you want to also speak, you can request the mic and then we'll give you an opportunity to speak. I see copyright amendment bill. I'm saying in Nigeria, folklore is not copyrighted and must be run through the indigenous communities. It comes from our Nigeria Copyright Commission before being used for commercial purposes. Oh, interesting. Someone says, I don't know and I should know. I came here to find out how I can know more. Oh, great. Ceslause, you raised your hand.
Yes, I think the person who mentioned the folklore aspect of Nigerian copy law meant folklore is now copyrighted per se. That was, the outcome of the 2022 Copyright Act in Nigeria. Yes.
Okay, thank you. I thought it was not copyrighted because I know in Ghana you can't use anything folklore without getting express permission from the folklore board. So yeah, that was good to know. Someone says expanded scope of protection, digital and online environment, Copyright and Neighboring Rights Act. I'm wondering which country is that. In the chat, I'm seeing South Africa is currently an amendment bill on their copyright. Okay. Someone says the last one was in 2022 in Nigeria. Interesting. Oh, I see a French one. I love this. Uh, okay, I think I am at time. I'm not too sure. Cassie, am I at time?
We have a couple more minutes, but if there are no more comments, we can move on to.
Sure. Yeah. All right. So I think we'll move on to the actual presentations. We have our first presenter who will be Ceslause. Ceslause, you have, I don't know if you've been given a co-host, right?
Yes. Oh,
Yes.
So, yes, so you can share your screen and then we can take it from
Okay.
there.
That's fine. Thank you. So, just before I start, Bukola changed my job position at WISCom, and I can see there is a WISCom member here. So that I don't lose my job at WISCom, I'm actually the executive coordinator and not director.
Oh,
Thank you.
it's all right.
That's fine.
Thanks. I think
Sure.
you need to update your Meta page and LinkedIn page though. So yeah.
Oh yeah, they are updated, but don't give me promotion before they give me one. Thank you. Hello everyone, and yes, it's a pleasure to let us know that what began in 2012 as the Nigerian Copyright Amendment was finally completed in 2022 and adopted, in 2023, I think March, by the past president, Muhammad Buhari. At this point, we are waiting for the regulations, which still gives us room to get some things that were not properly thought through, done rightly. And I will just share with us, some key changes and provisions that this new copyright amendment bill contains. I made this slide for the interest of those that may want to read further. I would have bullet pointed everything and spoken from, what I know. So first, there is a clear expansion of the author's rights from the, initial one. The initial one didn't have, the expansion on the scope of the author's rights. Now there is rights to control the availability and accessibility of their work through both, wired and wireless means. Great. There is also digital copyright. You can't just go on social media or the internet and violate someone's work or infringe on someone's copyright. The person has the right to alert the NCC, which stands for Nigerian Copyright Commission, and get them to yank it off. And of course, the new act made room for some limitations and exceptions. Now it ensures that there is, access to creative works outrightly for purpose like education. they made an exception for educational institutions, those that are using it for research. And of course, limitations. There are more limitations now for private use, just so people don't abuse these exceptions. And then there is expansion on freedom of panorama. So before we categorically had them, let's say public structures or sculptures, etc. Now it's expanded to say audiovisual that are in public spaces. Great. It's an improvement, owing to the fact that things have changed since the last Copyright Act in Nigeria. And then there is now, remuneration for sound recordings. The new act grants performers, copyright owners of sound recordings the rights, to actually receive fair and equitable payment for commercial broadcasts. This was not there on the, last act. And the moral rights, of course, the new law strengthens moral rights, including the right to object to false attribution of authorship. If you don't own the copyright and it's being attributed to you wrongly, please, by all means, there's a process to object. And, even if it's an orphan work, which is used to define maybe a work that they don't know the owner, for instance, don't, just say, hey, let me enjoy the benefits of the copyright. There's a process to object to that false attribution. And then the enforcement, was also changed. Now there's expansion of powers to Nigeria Copyright Commission, which is now the ability for them to effectively enforce copyright provisions and establish, a fund for the commission's operation. So for those of us who didn't know, in somewhere like Nigeria, orphaned works used to be in limbo, right? But now there is an established process for Nigerian Copyright Commission to sort of find a way, at least if they don't find the owner directly, maybe the person is dead and all, the next of kin or the person to whom the estate is willed, can be the direct beneficiary of the work. And then there is adoption and implementation of the Marrakesh Treaty. For those of us who didn't know, there was a treaty there is a treaty called Marrakesh Treaty, which happened some years ago. I don't remember exactly. That catered to, blind people or people that can't read print due to their, I wouldn't say handicap, but maybe inabilities. So the new Nigeria Copyright Act or law has made sure that it has given provisions, for these people to recreate, adapt any copyrighted work without, infringing it. Like they can do this, and there's no infringement to that effect. Now there is a known electronic registration system. Before it was paperwork upon paperwork, but now there is simply a link that you just click, to register your copyright and, maybe make and claim payments accordingly. And of course, the simultaneous civil and criminal actions. Now the Act allows for both civil and criminal actions to be pursued simultaneously in case of copyrights. And this, last change is where I'm very much worried due to, the kind of judicial system that we have in Nigeria. While these changes were going on, if you live in a country like mine, where the judiciary is not the last hope of the common man, you should make sure that any reform going on in your country leaves little to nothing to courts. Make sure that these things are, nipped in the bud from the get-go. And then I would share with us, putting in contrast the Copyright Act of 2022 versus public good, because no matter what we do, if these things actually infringe on things like education or the work we Wikimedians do, then it's wrong, because we know to the extent to which we've been and are still promoting free and open knowledge. So while the Freedom of Panorama Act, which is on the Section 20, subsection 1E of the Nigeria Copyright Act of 2022, includes artistic work, that are permanently in public display, and of course, audiovisual works and broadcasts. Now, this means that the filmmakers, or maybe those in the video space, can have a field day having fun with public work, doing their footages, etc. for production. They are allowed to do this without seeking permission from the copyright owners. But there is a limitation to that. Those of you who are Wikimedians that go on photo walks to document Wiki Loves Africa, Wiki Loves Earth, whatever, Wiki Loves Monument, you actually cannot do that in Nigeria on clean slate. It's highly debatable on how much you could get away with from taking still pictures, capturing and sharing images of those kind of works that are in public. This means that if you come out to take a photograph in public of a public artwork, or sharing it online or in print, for example, you might still require, a permission from the owner of the work. And now, of course, there is a non-commercial exception, which, is for educational institutions and for educational purposes. We could fall under that as Wikimedians, but it's still very debatable. You can use these public works as long as you're not making money from them, and then those into research. There's still a loophole there that could be exploited by anybody who wants to sue you blind. Because let's say there is a Wiki Loves Monument or Wiki Loves Africa going on, and I take a picture and the picture wins a prize. Is that still non-commercial? Yes, you could say it's non-commercial, but the fact that I received something for uploading that picture could put me in big trouble if, it's in Nigeria from where I took that picture. So these educational exceptions, research purposes, exceptions, and all, you probably don't need to seek permission, but still, this exception is narrow and they need to be clearly defined. And then there is, of course, some contrast to what the previous act had, around legislation limitation on freedom of panorama. The old act, of course, was less specific about the types of work covered by the freedom of panorama. It's because of that this new one, like I mentioned earlier, now bears audiovisual, which covers a lot of things. And then the impact is that, yes, with the new act and freedom of panorama, it can create issues for photographers, like I earlier said, artists and cultural or heritage or glam institutions, one way or the other, that rely on capturing, and sharing public art or images of public art for various purposes. And then, of course, looking at the other comparison between the act and public good, the 2022 Act introduces new exceptions, for glam, yes, to a very good extent. Now, galleries, libraries, archives, and museums can reproduce and preserve, the work of a particular author digitally for the purpose of replacement and routine operations. I particularly love this act because I was opportune to tour the Jaga building or Jaga library that got burnt in, I think, March 2021 in the University of Cape Town. There were so many what ifs after the fire. What if the, copyright amendment had happened and these guys were really given the leeway to make digital copies of, the books and the various content of that particular library. So yes, it's possible that that was what also informed, the act, this particular section 25 of the Nigeria Copyright Act. Hey, it could be a fire outbreak and all that. And, by all means, seeing how that played out in South Africa, meeting the team that was responsible for, salvaging about 13,000 crates of the content of that library that burnt down. It's something that, should you hear of any reform, copyright-wise in your country, make sure that the GLAM institutions are heavily protected and considered. And of course, the section 20, subsection 1, broadens the scope of fair dealing. Fair dealing is what we know as fair use in the Wikimedia space. Giving libraries more leeway in activities that may not fall under narrowly defined exceptions, of course. The section 20, subsection 3, strengthens this, invalidating any licensing terms that try to override the exceptions given to these libraries. If you've really read about the incident of the Jaga Library in the University of Cape Town, you would understand this better. Moreover, section 50, subsection 7 of the Nigeria Copyright Act clarifies that the new rules against bypassing technological protection measures do not apply when circumvention is, properly done to exercise a legal exception, like in this case. And of course, the 2022 Act in Nigeria preserves key elements, from the 1988 legislation. Notably, it maintains restrictions on distribution rights in sections 9, 11, and 12, respectively, limiting them to commercial activities. So these safeguards, allow libraries to continue lending materials. Additionally, libraries can also retain the right to import lawful copies of works they believe will be useful to the public they're serving. And earlier exceptions, specifically for libraries, are still in place. So it's safe to say that libraries and generically GLAM institutions in Nigeria are heavily protected and considered in the 2022 Copyright Act. And of course, the other thing that, put me off was what the Act said about AI or generative AI. So it was not clear-cut, how do you want to make a rule or a law about works that are created with generative AI? And then it's not well defined. Take, for instance, I'm a musician and I want to make an album. Justice would know for sure what it takes to make an album now, going through the conventional means, meeting a producer and all that. If you don't have like $10,000 to $20,000, you've not started. But with the use of AI, $200 could do this for you. And if you wanted anybody's voice, maybe Akon or Beyonce on the tracks, AI could give you these things clean. So it's great, right? Especially in somewhere like Africa, where many young people don't even earn good enough money, to go about their artistic works. So why does the, section 2, subsection 1 of the Nigeria Copyright Act say that, AI generated work is only subject to copyright if, the original owner proves to have put in substantial effort? That's the word, substantial effort, in the work, which is ridiculous. Are you saying, let's say for a song that lasts 2 minutes, that if the AI generated voice of maybe a particular original copyright owner was 50% of the work? So I feel that we indeed should have put a percentage of the adoption or the adaptation, so that it's defined, because this is very vague. What is reasonable extent here? What is reasonable input in terms of the owner being able to claim copyright? So this is one of those situations that I say must not get to court, because if it does, it's a matter of who, has the most money in a digital system like ours. But then looking at that and with consultation from some group of tech people, Nigeria is a very serious tech hub. It was proposed a solution that such decision can of course be dealt with some international alliance, precisely the Africa Regional Intellectual Property Organization, shortly known as ARIPO. We possibly could align with these people to make sure that there is harmony when it comes to policies and global standards around AI and technology in this age and time. I think I would just stop here because there's a lot to say when it comes to the 2022 Act. But yes, it has some interesting things that we could enjoy as a people. The fair dealing is great. The exceptions are great. And now there is, online content and digital landscape. Copies are now also being used to refer to digital copies, not just the hard copy that we know. And of course, what was mentioned about Nigeria during their icebreaker, there is folklore protection now. The Act specifically recognizes and protects the folklore as traditional cultural expression. As a tech giant and all, you can't just mine folklore and say you're mining data. You can't mine people's, intangible heritage and all that. And of course, there is also serious thought put into the copyright duration. For instance, works that are, owned by government and state authorities in Nigeria now, their copyright duration have been reduced from 70 years to 50 years. We would have wished for more. But yeah, let's take the win where there is one and, still progress with making sure that we get the best as soon as possible before the regulations come up. Other notable changes will include the word cinematographic or the phrase cinematograph films. They've actually ditched that on our copyright, and now it's been replaced with audiovisual works. Yes. And now, some efforts that they use for the AI, it was too consistent from the 1988 legislation, and now they are using sufficient effort, but still, it's not good enough from the way I see it. Yeah, I would leave this to the next speaker, and hopefully can take questions by the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ceslause, for this presentation. If you have any questions, you can either put it in the chat on the Etherpad, or you can, once we get to the question and answer, you can ask directly. I think the next speaker would be Sipho. Sipho, you can go. Yeah.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you.
Ceslause, can you hold on? Ceslause, can you share your screen for him?
I can also share from my end. Okay, cool.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody who's in my time zone. Good evening and good morning to all the rest. My name is Sipho Fako, and I'm from South Africa. And thank you, Ceslause, for your presentation. I feel as if I could have just removed Nigeria and put South Africa in that, because the issues are so similar, and it's related to its dialogue. Please go into the next slide. Yeah, so as I mentioned, I'm Sipho Fako. I'm a content archivist, work in the creative sector, proud member of the Wikimedia ZA chapter, and I'm also a librarian. So I'm a lot of things, and the sectors I'm in are affected in such it's in different ways. So yeah, and this conversation today is so interesting. So as much as I'm a Wikimedian, I'm also a creative, so that it kind of puts me apart. So I'll be throwing a lot regarding my experience in the broadcast industry and also my involvement within the open knowledge spaces. And mainly, the main references though will be drawn from earlier and this year's demonstration held by Section 27 and other organizations involving creatives, librarians, and civil and society, who basically it's gathered outside the Constitutional Court. It's pushing for justice around and the copyrights and the performance and the rights of performers. So, and the energy and the urgency of that day is where I'll be drawing from. It's because and justice delayed is justice denied, and the longer and we actually and wait on this bill and to be signed by our president. And the longer and the rights of creatives and those in especially the educational sector are affected. Next slide, please. So South Africa's current Copyright Act is from 1978, right? So we just have to understand this. So it's older than I am. I know it's definitely older than most of the people in the chat now. It predates the internet, it predates digitization and even democracy. So it's a very old bill, and the Copyright Amendment Bill seeks to modernize this by introducing exceptions to and such as and fair use. It looks at expanding exceptions for the education, libraries, archive sector, and including increasing protection for performers and persons with disabilities, like people and who have to access its materials and that are in braille and stuff, and that's currently and very expensive at the moment. So it seeks to make exceptions along those. So there is a lot of good in the Copyright Amendment Bill if it were to be signed, as it seeks to include exceptions that are in par and with global standards, and the Marrakesh Treaty, and which would allow more access for people who are blind and visually impaired. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, and this journey has been going for over 10 years. It's been going through various courts, but it just has not been passed by the president. And this is largely due to a lack of public participation, let's redefine public participation. It's because it has not actually been considerate of the people who it would affect, and whether it's educators, copyright owners, authors, and so on. So there hasn't been constructive and dialogue, and that has affected a lot. So yeah, it's in where we currently are. Yeah, it is that, and this amendment bill is still after 10 years being reviewed and by and the president. Next slide, please. So, as with most reforms, the bill has sparked serious debate, and there are some tensions. So, I just kept it short. It's because there are actually other organizations who have more knowledge and more expertise into the nitty-gritties of the act, or rather of the amended bill. But the key tensions are around the fair use and fair dealing question, as in how open is too open. So as an educator or somebody in open access, we would be all up for it, because it would mean that if we would want to use works, and with this exception of fair use, it would be easy for me to just take a person's work and just use it without having to give any acknowledgement or credit. If they wanted to oppose my usage, and they would actually have to take me to court. But whereas with the current outdated bill, I would have to credit anybody's works, and it would be the other way around. And the onus would be on me to find them, to inform them, and to ensure and that they are properly credited. So what this current it's fair use its exception and would mean and for the person that owns the copyright is that they would actually have to do what CMOs are doing and go to find actually who is using my work, and then I'd actually have to go to court to create a case to say that my work was illegally used, and so on and so on, and wait for an outcome. So that whole process will not only be time intensive, but obviously it will be expensive. And litigation is not something that we actually practice or do here in South Africa or in Africa in general. So we can clearly see that this is a copy and paste from another region, and that's as much as it would be good if it's open access and it's fairly used, but we can clearly see how this can open up the door for exploitation. For instance, if I have more money than you, or if I'm a big record company and I take your work illegally, I know that I can just delay the case and so on. So, and that's one of the main thing. And then people just want to ensure and that their royalties are protected, and these are mainly from the creative sector and the broadcast sector. So it's one bill, it's the same bill, and we're all up for it, but it just has to be clear, and we have to balance public interest with economic sustainability. Okay. Yeah, so I'm not sure what's going on with the slide.
Sorry, Ceslause, I think you're sharing all your screen. We can see you on another document. Yeah.
Yeah, so the broadcasting and performing arts industries in particular are concerned about how its content it would be governed under these reforms and if they would be actually be protected. So all that is being highlighted in this is that there isn't enough dialogue and participation and from the people who this would affect. Please go back. I think it's 2 slides. It's 2 slides before Justice. Yeah. So next slide. Not that one. Next. To the slide of opportunities, and yes, the next slide. Next slide. Yes. The one above, the one you just skipped. Yes, yes, that one. So as I mentioned earlier on, or when I started, I'd be referencing and mostly and from the demonstration that happened between, or rather that was held and by the various organizations and from the creative sector and civil society. So because of the language of this amendment bill, it wasn't really clear to those who it would affect. And Recreate has been at the forefront at actually educating and the public on what this amendment bill actually means. If I'm not mistaken, and they were one of the first organizations to actually and take this and challenge Parliament before, and Section 27 it actually also took it up. So, and those two organizations have been instrumental, and though and we'll share other it's other links, so it's a Recreate, it's Blind SA, it's Section 27. Saga has also been instrumental, and Saga, which is the South African Guild, it's a South African Guild of Actors. I know, and they've been at the forefront. So, and those are diverse and sectors of all advocating for the bill to be signed by just one clarity that's in it. We can't have the same blanket and copyright or act for everyone, as it affects us all and differently. So, and that's where and we currently are now. And as we can see in the slides, and we're fighting as disabled rights activists, we're fighting as musicians, we're fighting as creators, we're fighting as educators, and so on now. And we just need the policy makers to actually come to the table and listen and actually not delay this process, but actually move it forward. Next slide, please. So from a Wikimedia perspective and the lens of open and knowledge, the bill does present major opportunities. For instance, it enables digitization, long-term preservation, and the long-term preservation of cultural heritage. It supports GLAM's institutions to serve and public and missions by making more materials easily accessible, and it aligns with and Wikimedia's and movement and values of improving free access to information across borders. So this is a big win for education and research, only if the bill is passed and implemented clearly. Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned, it does benefit open and knowledge sector, but there's also many concerns within the creative sector. So in the creative sector, and some of the concerns spark fear because there's a lot of unclear and language being used it's in this bill, and the unclear language makes us fear that all this high English, if I can put it that way, may lead to uncompensated reuse of its works, of people's works. I know the broadcast industry is also very and worried about losing its control over licensing and syndication rights. And there's also anxiety about the enforcement of it, like how will fair use actually be applied in court, and will it be the same for everyone, and those kind of things. So it's not really clear, and we are really worried. It's because we have a lot of creatives that have died poor, and that just is a fact in South Africa. It's our biggest example. It is of the reuse of the song of the Lion King song, and how many years and that took. So for a bill and like this to still not be signed or even clear is very shocking, as that song is even older than I am, and that case did not end. Yeah, it ended kind of happily, but it's not really, and what we want to see, replaying itself. So these fears are valid, and they show that a reform must come with clear guidelines, education, and obviously dialogue. We've got to speak to each other, like policies have got to speak to those who it will affect and include them. Next slide, please. So Wikimedia South Africa's position in all of this. So I want to be clear. I'm speaking on my own behalf, in my own capacity, and by no means by it's Wikimedia South Africa today. But I do believe in that, and the chapter and the community has a unique role. It allows us to act as public educators, helping others understand how its copyright actually its impact, its digital participation, and as members of Wikimedia and ZA, and we can help bridge the gap between and legal and frameworks and everyday and practices, especially in underrepresented and communities. And if we go back to just to what it's Wikimedia and stands for, and what it says about policy, that policy change is most successful when informed by those who are mostly directly impacted and best understand their local context. So, and from that, and we see that, and Wikimedians can actually be public educators in this. So let's just reflect. And the next slide, please. So having and just schemed and through all of that, it leaves us with some questions, as in and who these policies actually benefit most, or who benefits most from this reform, and who might still be left out. And it is our opportunity to ensure that we don't repeat the mistakes of the past, and that we make sure that not too many people are left out, and we keep on moving with the times as the times are changing. We cannot be waiting for another 50 years before changing or adjusting according to how materials have changed. So we have to be at the forefront of that, and we have to answer questions like, how do we make sure and that we protect creators and also expand knowledge, because they are kind of hand in hand, So if I want to train, for example, an AI model, I'd be promoting free access to data. But if I'm the copyright owner of the data, or I create the data, I'd also want to be compensated if any of my data is used and somebody is making money and from it. So these kind of reforms will have to speed up as and the changes and keep on happening. And lastly, it leaves a question of what can Wikimedians and open and knowledge advocates play in future copyright engagement, especially in Africa, where and we can see that we are all facing similar issues, and that most of these acts and policies are copied and pasted from regions which don't really understand it's not really understand, but they don't really factor in the local context. So, and these kind of engagements need to start happening, and so we can move forward. So if changes are happening in South Africa, they don't have to wait 10 years in Uganda to be aligned with the trends. As long as we engage, we're going to keep this kind of dialogue, and we can to move in uniformity. So, next slide, please. So, it's having said that, I'd just like to thank the Let's Connect team and my fellow speakers for allowing and these kind of conversations, or this conversation to particularly it's happen and spark the dialogue, and so that and we can really start thinking about these fundamental issues and start and tackling them, because the main three things that we all want is access, equity, and justice, and respect for creators. Thank you.
Thank you, Sipho, for your presentation. Thank you so much. When you go into the chat, there are so many resources that have been shared by myself, by other participants in the chat. There's also the Wikimedia Day Zero workshop. There's the Global Advocacy link to Meta. There's also an advocacy Telegram page. So we'll share all that after we get to the question and answer. So I now move to Sandra for her presentation as well.
Thank you. Justice, could you please confirm that you can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. So thank you very much, Ceslause, and also Sipho for sharing copyright reforms from South Africa and from Nigeria. Just a disclaimer that I'm not a copyright expert, but I'll be able to share what I've been able to learn from Uganda as a country, but also most importantly, also thanking the people who have been able to enable us learn about this. Ziski was on the call, but I see she dropped out from Wikimedia Policy at Wikimedia Foundation. And also I see Kyla from Recreate, who was also able to organize a conference last year, and I was able to learn a lot about copyright. So for the case of Uganda, we have the Copyright and Neighboring Rights Act that was first created in 2006, and I'll be able to talk about how the various amendments has happened in the past and what the Act really entails. It really serves as a governing framework, especially for copyright and its related rights in Uganda, but also most importantly, it gives creators exclusive rights, and this also allows them to be able to control publication, reproduction, and performance. And The Act also defines eligibility criteria for protection under the Copyright and Neighboring Act, and this sets clear guidelines on how protected work may be utilized by third party, and also it establishes the duration of rights protected by law, highlighting how this addressed the offenses, the infringement, and some of the penalties. So, looking at some of the copyright realities in Uganda, especially looking at the creative industries, um, looking at the industry gaps and also the challenges, despite several advocacy work that has been done, especially by Uganda National Musicians Federation, which involves very many artists, you realize that there's still lack of copyright to their work, especially to their own music, and also the weak enforcement and limited awareness, especially that hinders the protection of intellectual property rights. And looking at the industry, right now we have about 12,040 um, 472 organizations, creative industry in Uganda, and it employs about 386,000 people across different fields of music, film, arts, and related sector. So, what the legal framework really says about the Copyright and Neighboring Act of 2006, it says that infringement that is punishable is one, a fine not exceeding 100 currency point, but also on imprisonment of up to 4 years. But also the copyright also talks about that it can be secured, especially when you file your register to the copyright to the Uganda Registration Service Bureau, and also being able to attach a copy of your work and being able to publish also in the Uganda Gazette for 60 days. So, looking at some of the key highlights around copyright reforms in Uganda, the first time that was enacted was in 2006, and there was a draft amendment in 2023, and that was discussed in December. And now, in 2024, that was last year, the amendment is still being tabled at the parliament. And the last time I followed up, there was no response in regards to that, of how it has now. So I believe it's still before the parliament. So looking at some of the paradigm shift around technology in regards to the copyright reform in Uganda has been also the increased digital content creation and online distributions, and also the increase of the rise of AI streaming and also cross-border digital platforms, and the growing need for to protect creators' rights, especially the digital environment. And I see a lot of conversation has already been started to happen, especially creatives being now more aware, and also around copyright of their work. So the people that has been leading this has been the Uganda Law Reforms Commission, that has been leading review processes, but also response to some of the international obligations, such as the WIPO Copyright Treaty and the WIPO Performance and Pornography Treaty. And as I said before, the first time that was published, the amendment was in February 2024. And there was a lot of also stakeholder validation meeting in December. And the amendment is important, especially for the Uganda case, because of the evolving technology and also the international standards and creative industry needs that also has been risen. And some of the proposed amendment, especially in regards to um, the copyright. The Copyright Act has been around orphan works exploitation, that also around allowing the use of work, especially with an identifiable author or owner, and also the extended copyright duration, which they have proposed increasing protection from 50 to 70 years, and also around written assignments requirement, whereby all transfers should be in writing and she's valid for 20 years. And then there's the quasi judicial power to register, which also grants the registrar authority to resolve disputes, and the aspect of increased penalty fees, whereby there's going to be tougher consequences, especially for infringement on copyright related rights. And then around also the registration of collection of collecting society, there's also the mandatory registration and defined roles for collective rights organization, the CRO. And the most important goal for the reform was to ensure that there is equitable remuneration for creatives, but also strengthening the regulatory oversights and future-proof copyright law against technology distribution. And what processes has been done under this has been especially doing a lot of concept, issuing paper, but also identifying what are the gaps, the scope, and the methodology of the review. And also this was framed in discussion point for national consultation, but also there was a lot of stakeholder consultation that was led by the Uganda Law Reform Commission, and it involved a lot of multi-stakeholders, consultation with government agencies, the member of parliament, the creative industries, and the collective management organization and copyright content users and law enforcement. And the processes that was used was around feedback analysis and recommendation, collecting input for consultation, but also the role of the Uganda Law Reform Commission was very important, especially grounded in real work issues, but also to improve and also modernize and reform national law. And then there was a lot of joint consultation, and key issues that was raised around the consultation was the weak copyright enforcement and the disconnection between telecoms aggregators and content owners. So, how effective was the copyright reforms in Uganda? Some of the strength that was observed was around the stakeholder engagement and also the regional inclusivity, especially involving the district level workshops, but also community level participation. And some citizens also had opportunity to provide feedback through forums and also submissions. And there was also research-based approach, the tech-sensitive approach as well, aimed at also tackling some of the challenges around digital platforms and AI. And also, there was a lot of focus on also enforcement, ensuring that reforms should strengthen protection and enforcement of copyright laws. So, besides the strength, there were also some challenges where there was limited fair compensation for creatives, whereby many artists and creators also still struggle to receive a fair payment, especially for their work from digital platform and some of other platforms. And then the collar ring back tone that also generate very significant revenue, but creators also get a small fraction to it. And of course, the low awareness and education, if not because of the ecosystem of Wikimedia, I wouldn't have known about copyright. So many Ugandans really lack knowledge of copyright, and including even the community as a whole. I'm glad that some of the Wikimedians have joined. So there's need for more work by us Wikimedians to be able to see how we can make this known, especially on work on Creative Commons and open access. So, what does this really mean for Wikimedians, especially in Uganda? The Act really tends to support the Creative Commons license, but with a condition, and also The Act also guarantees exclusive rights to, especially to copyright holders, but also it recognizes fair use, public domain, but an unlimited exception. And also the CC, which is the Creative Commons license, are compatible with some of the Ugandan law, as long as they don't conflict with specific provisions, as compulsory license. So the Uganda's law is being tabled and at the parliament and under review. So we need to stay informed as Wikimedians so that we know how the changes might really impact, especially content sharing and licensing on Wikimedia platforms. And some of the key focus could be around orphans work, digital rights, and enforcement, especially for projects that talks about public domain and CC lives content. And the implication is especially for CC license and access has been the proposed reforms that may really affect how free content can be reused, remixed, shared, especially under CC license, but also releasing work under CC license. What does it mean for copyright grants permission recognized under the law? And some of the CC licenses are used. And then also the fair use and public interest, whereby law should be able to balance creators' rights and public access to information, especially for education, research, and cultural use, which is core to the Wikimedia value. So fair use provision, there's limited use without permission is allowed for, especially teaching, complementary criticism, news reporting, and also research. And also there's it's also useful for citing text or referencing media in Wikimedia projects. So there's also the aspect around public domain use, whereby the work around public domain can also be freely accessible, can also be freely uploaded to commons, and also includes work with expired copyright or never protected. And also the aspect of indigenous knowledge and traditional knowledge, where there's also a growing need to protect and ethically share indigenous knowledge. And I don't know if there's someone from Wikimedia Australia, but it would be good to hear from them on their indigenous data governance model that can also guide, especially Wikimedians in Uganda. So, what do the copyright um, reforms mean for Uganda again? Because our contribution should be able to respect copyright rules, especially around images, music, traditional stories, and oral histories that also very much tied to the folklore project. So knowing what is public domain, what is freely shareable, and how to attribute resources is important. So from this conversation, we hope that we can also be able to share what are some of the collision that already exists, since there are similar issues shared in Uganda, Nigeria, and South Africa. But also, I would believe in other countries might be the same. So let's see how we can maybe build a Pan-African, a global. We already have the Wikimedia policy, Wikimedia network for copyright group that exists, so that we can advocate for fair, inclusive, and public interest-oriented copyright laws, and one that also protects local creatives, especially ensuring that knowledge remains open. So we can start by, especially for the case of Uganda, because I realize Nigeria and South Africa is a bit more hands-on also, especially in the work they're doing on copyright, engage in copyright literacy, know what the law is and how it impacts our contribution, but also promote ethical sharing, especially around indigenous content. Joint advocacy is also key, learning from other countries, and also collaborate with some of the allies like Wikimedia Australia that are really doing a lot of work on license model. So at this point, I will hand over to Ceslause, who will be able to take us through a brainstorming on copyright coalition. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Sandra. And thank you, Sipho. You know, we all can see the similarities in these reforms in Nigeria, Uganda, and South Africa. And yes, we, shouldn't wait until there's a reform on the way to start scampering. How do you, get involved in the discussion? For instance, in Nigeria, they started this conversation in 2012. I think I was in my final year in university or about to graduate, but nobody heard of it until last year. And myself, Shola, and some other members of Wikimedia Nigeria paid a visit to the current director of the Nigerian Copyright Commission, and we were able to know why. So what they have been doing was consulting the stakeholders in silos, meet with Association of Movie Producers, meet with Musicians Association of Nigeria, meet with, cinematographers. And, the first opportunity I had to meet someone from the commission who was directly involved in the thing was in South Africa, thanks to Kyla and the Recreate ZA team. And I told her point blank to tell her boss that that was wrong. If you were doing construction in silo, it tells us that you had something to hide. How about you bring everyone together in the room and let's, sit across the table and negotiate our ways through this? Because what we've learned, even in Wikimedia Nigeria, there is a public advocacy, working group of which I'm part. You could do all your nice Wikimedia public advocacy work. If you don't consult these other stakeholders, filmmakers, musicians, and all, they could tank your work in the end and destroy everything you've built. So this is why coalition is very important. And this is an opportunity to also invite you to a Wikimedia session on how Recreate ZA had, successfully built an operational coalition with all the copyright stakeholders in South Africa. So please be on the lookout for the session date at Wikimania. So
Yeah.
yes, why is this?
We have
Yes.
like questions for you, folks. So I think Bukola would ask the questions once you answer them, and then we can get back into the coalition building. I hope that
Oh,
works.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much, Justice, and all the sharers who had shared or given different insights about the agents and everyone working towards the copyright reform and what Wikimedians need to know to engage in this conversation. I see some comments in our Mentimeter already. For those of you who have questions for the sharers and you are yet to drop them on the Mentimeter, I'll just share my screen so you see exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah, so if you go to this link, I already dropped the link in the chats and I just did again. You see where you can just enter in your questions and I can just share your questions directly on this screen. So currently we have a question here that says, how do we start participating in these debates if we are not connected to policymakers? So I don't know if any of the sharers would like to respond to this first question that we have here before we move on to the next one. Yes, please, Ceslause, you can. speak.
Yes, Justice was right. So the question will still come around coalition. And you don't have to have an uncle or a relative in the government to get involved. You can start by what Wikimedia Nigeria is currently doing. Sit down and map out the possible stakeholders when it comes to copyright. Authors, filmmakers, cinematographers, musicians, they have guilds and organizations in your country, and start contacting them. This would also mean being ready to train each of these organizations. In fact, after our courtesy visit to the Nigerian Copyright Commission, they requested that we train them, just so they have a broader understanding of where we as Wikimedians are coming from and where we are going. And part of the proposition on the table was also asking us if we could coordinate a symposium of all these stakeholders, because it seems like Wikimedians are the most neutral elements in all the conversations. So you must be ready to do this. Train all the stakeholders that you make contact with so that they see things the Wikimedia way, and be ready to dilute the conversation. All those legal terms and all can be easily diluted. And also remember to tell them, like you probably understand now, how it affects education, perhaps the possibility of a young artist from Africa to make a living is a clear indication that as much as it could be a legal issue, copyright, it's also a social issue. In fact, I feel like it's mostly a social issue than a legal issue. So if you make these clear distinctions and, these guys that are other stakeholders understand it, the filmmakers would fight your battle. I mean, Wikimedians, we are just, someone called us ghost workers in the past. The filmmakers would carry this on their head and make sure that the policymakers hear you loud and clear. You don't have to be at the forefront. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Ceslause, for that in-depth response to the question. We have another question here that says, how can someone who is new to all this would be able to understand all the advocacy and copyright stuff? Is it documented somewhere? Also, is it beginners friendly? Will any other sharer like to respond to this? How do we bring in newcomers to talks that involve advocacy and copyrights?
Looks like Sipho.
Okay.
Yeah, so I would say someone who's new to this is just start educating or exposing yourself to these kind of conversations. First, start actually joining and searching and seeing what resonates with you. It's because I think if you tackle it from a detailed level, and you'll find that there's so many acts and so many reforms, and it might just overwhelm you. But if you take it from your own context, for instance, if you are creative, right, then start looking for how it affects creatives, and then be more granular. Like if you're a musician, see how the act in your country affects musicians, and hear what other musicians are saying about this bill to truly understand. And then from there, and you can start and getting into the broader conversation. Because if you take it and from the head, it's just going to be, it's too big. It's because us creatives don't understand. People in the open access world don't understand. Even the policymakers don't understand. And that's why we are having this. And those who are gaining know that we don't understand, and they throwing South Africa with these terms, they throw Nigeria with these terms, with other terms, they throwing Uganda with other terms, but it's actually one thing. So start by understanding how it affects you, and then you can start and seeing that, oh, actually, they're doing the same thing in Nigeria by just calling it something else. And this, as much as we're speaking about and copyright, it's applicable to other exploitations as well, like within the AI sector, but that's a whole different conversation. But to just sum it up, start with how it affects you and understanding how it affects your context. And I think it will become easier to understand. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's like the perfect response to this. Yeah, so I think that's all of the questions we have on the Mentimeter currently. I don't know if we have new questions on other channels in the chat box. Okay, I see Abu Bakar raised his hand. Please kindly unmute to speak. I'll just stop sharing.
Alors, moi, je vais parler en français, hein. Alors, bonsoir à tous et merci déjà pour cette discussion. J'espère que vous m'entendez bien, c'est Ceslause. Merci. Alors, moi, depuis que j'ai vu l'annonce de cette discussion, j'étais très, très content dans la mesure où nous réfléchissons depuis longtemps sur comment participer à cette conversation, comment faire en sorte que tout ce qui est en rapport avec les droits d'auteur évolue au niveau de la Guinée. En écoutant les trois intervenants tout à l'heure, ce qui m'a un peu moins surpris, c'est qu'ils sont un peu à un niveau très élevé par rapport à ce que moi je pense. Chez nous, nous avons beaucoup travaillé sur les questions des photos et nous partons sur un partenariat ciblé. Et je suis très reconnaissante que Jessica soit là aujourd'hui parce que l'année passée, on a eu à faire une campagne générale de sensibilisation où nous avons invité à nos conversations un parlementaire, donc quelqu'un qui est à l'Assemblée nationale, qui est artiste, comédien et acteur. Donc, avec lui, on pouvait l'expliquer exactement ce que nous voulons. J'ai entendu tout à l'heure quelqu'un dire qu'on n'a pas forcément besoin d'avoir un oncle dans le gouvernement pour faire bouger les choses. D'accord, c'est sa conception. Mais connaissant chez moi comment les choses fonctionnent, nous préférons directement impacter ceux qui sont au sommet. Si on a l'accord de ces personnes-là, nous pourrons faire bouger les choses. On est parti chercher les droits d'auteur en Guinée. Les droits d'auteur concernaient 1980. Donc, les réformes qui ont évolué jusqu'en 2016, on s'est rendu compte que rien n'a changé dans la loi. On a lu les deux documents. Au lieu qu'ils réduisent le temps des droits d'auteur de 70 ans en bas, ils sont montés à 80 ans. Donc, on a compris que si on ne fait rien, c'est que nous, les Wikimedians, nous serons impactés, on ne pourrait pas avancer. Donc, les photos, par exemple, nous nous basons beaucoup sur les photos. Nous voulons que le gouvernement change surtout les sites, qu'ils enlèvent les droits d'auteur sur les sites gouvernementaux, qu'ils arrêtent de mettre les logos sur les photos et les documents produits par l'administration. Parce que si nous regardons les États-Unis ou nous regardons la Russie ou d'autres pays, ils ont libéralisé ces choses-là qui font en sorte que nous, les Wikimedians, on peut avoir des images de qualité et faire évoluer les choses. Donc, nous voulons vraiment cibler quelque chose. Mais en écoutant votre conversation, je vois que vous êtes un peu en avant et que quelque chose me dit que je suis prêt à rejoindre cette coalition. Je parle de moi, mais je parle de ma communauté pour vous montrer exactement ce que nous avons fait et comment faire en sorte que peut-être de façon particulière, parce que je vois que vous parlez sur quelque chose de général et je ne comprends pas tout ça, mais peut-être avec le temps, je vais comprendre. Mais nous voulons vraiment cibler un secteur et faire en sorte que ça d'abord, ça change. Peut-être avec le Bureau guinéen des droits d'auteur, on pourrait faire évoluer d'autres lois. Mais déjà, cette conversation me plaît et puis nous continuerons à suivre ce que vous êtes en train de produire et je suis beaucoup plus d'accord avec une coalition de savoir ce qui se passe au Nigeria, en Afrique du Sud et faire en sorte que la loi évolue de façon collégiale. Souvent, quand c'est votre pays, c'est vos contributeurs de votre pays qui viennent voir les administrateurs, ils ne considèrent pas trop. Mais une coalition composée d'Afrique du Sud, du Nigeria, de l'Ouganda ou de la Côte d'Ivoire, co-signée, peut-être avec les GLAM, vous déposez ce document-là au niveau de l'administration, ils vont comprendre directement c'est quelque chose qui va faire bouger les choses et ils vont adhérer. Merci et bonne soirée à vous.
Okay, Ceslause, you want to respond to that? Thank you.
Oui, Abou, merci bien d'avoir fait des commentaires. Et comme peut-être des Guinéens, je crois que vous êtes déjà en contact avec l'organisation ONACID. Et c'est une organisation qui est peut-être la plus grande dans les noms des parties prenantes quand on parle de droits d'auteur. Donc, je vous conseille de contacter cette organisation et savoir comment contacter les autres, comme peut-être l'association des musiciens en Guinée et tout. Et comme ça, vous pouvez commencer de se connecter avec toutes les parties prenantes par rapport à la discussion des droits d'auteur en Guinée. Et comme ça, c'est possible même de proposer des évolutions, des changements, des contenus qui sont là au courant dans la rédaction de droits d'auteur en Guinée. C'est ce que je vous conseille. Merci.
Okay, I see Lucy, your hand is raised. Would you like to unmute to speak?
Yeah, thank you very much, Bukola. My question is directed to Ceslause. So during his presentation, he made mention of freedom of panorama, where you can take pictures of governments structures. So now I have a scenario where I posted a picture of a stadium. Oh no, an international airport, and it was part of submissions made during Wikileaks Monument 2023, and I used the picture as the background for the graphics as I'm handling the social media account for Wikileaks Monument. And after posting, I now got a notification or like a message from a user asking if the freedom of panorama in Nigeria has been amended to allow such. And I think I also made inquiry trying to get clarification on if I am violating or if it is not under the freedom of panorama to make use of such images, as it also aligns with what I'm doing is still under the Wikimedia Movement. And I think I didn't get any tangible feedback that clarified me on this. Now today I saw on your slide, based on what you shared too, where individuals can also make use of structures, government-owned structures. Now, I want to know, is it based on what I shared, like my experience on the social media, does it also apply to using it in the social media, or is there any other aspect in which this clauses applies to? I don't know if I've been able to like project my question.
Yes. So reshare anywhere on whatever platform with the current change when it comes to freedom of panorama is going to be a problem for a still image. If it were a video, fine, you would have gotten away with it. And I presume that Wikileaks Monument in Nigeria was around September, October in 2023. And this new act came into effect in March of that year. So like I said, while it makes absolute, exception for videos and all that, pictures are still cut in between where it's highly debatable. And if you noticed, I think there was a time Wikimedia Nigeria sort of halted contributions for Wikilove's Monument. I think it was in 2023 or so, just because we didn't want to start dealing with the gray areas yet. So whoever, got your attention to that must have been very current. So hopefully with the regulations expected to come up maybe before the year runs out or early next year, according to the Nigerian Copyright Commission, we're hoping to get that reviewed. If you're giving freedom of panorama, it should be absolute, especially for those promoting free and open knowledge. But for now, it's a gray area. And I sincerely advise, if you're in Nigeria, stay clear. Stay clear. If not, we may be visiting you in Kuje prison for infringement. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for providing answer and clarifying Lucy's doubts. So Lucy, just to emphasize, you need to stay clear of anything panorama and just focus on taking pictures that do not land you in trouble. Yeah. Okay, so we have some few minutes and we can still take in some questions. We have some 4 more minutes for this Q&A. So if you do have questions you want to ask, you want to raise, please kindly unmute to speak or use the chats. I'm also going back to the Mentimeter to see if we have any new comments.
So I think
Okay.
if we can wait for new people to ask, and then we'll let Ceslause finish his talk on the coalition builder. Yeah, Ceslause, you can
Okay.
take it.
Okay. So just to mention that, the coalition is very important. If not, you'll be the lone voice in the wilderness. And once you're a lone voice, it's easy to silence you and your amazing ideas as a Wikimedian. But by the time you bring filmmakers, producers, musicians into the fold, especially filmmakers and producers, it will be difficult to ignore you. You need to be difficult to be ignored. And, be very open to seeking counsel from lawyers who understand it. It's law somehow, but they are subject matter experts. I understand that some governments even have copyright institutions, like a school where you could do 6 months, 1 year program, become an expert as a lawyer or as an individual. So make sure you seek counsel and make sure the consultation process for any reform is wide. My fellow Nigerians will know about this say that no matter how primitive your location is, a ballot box would always get to you come election. But when it's something that would benefit you directly as a citizen, you will not see government there. So make sure that the same level of energy they put getting you to maybe sell your vote or vote for them is the same that they put when it comes to consulting you about copyright reforms. School teachers are your friends when it comes to coalition, the education board, teachers, etc. They are your friends. And there was something we discussed at a private session with IFLA and of course the education board and Teachers Association of South Africa. And that's the possibility of making this very cumbersome discussion of copyright to be less cumbersome. Why are we not teaching copyright in primary schools or at least in high schools? If you have teenagers crushing further maths, physics, quadratic formula, etc., they could crush copyrights and start understanding it from there. I don't know about the primary school some of us went to, but in our primary school, we had kids who were doing graffiti on school walls, drawing and things like that. So if kids were already getting involved in that in primary schools, why not start intimating them about copyright early enough? Let's not make it an adult conversation. In Nigeria, most of the musicians are teenagers, or they started as teenagers. You know, imagine a Rema who is selling out 30,000, 40,000 capacity stadium as a 17-year-old going to sign, you know, record label deals without knowing copyrights or his right as a curator. It's a disaster waiting to happen. So as Africans, make sure that, you know, the consultation is not just an adult conversation. Make sure they take it to high schools and make sure that, you know, if there's a possibility, let there be curriculum or syllabuses, you know, being taught in, you know, secondary schools about copyright. So that by the time these people get to adulthood, it's easier to navigate. There are people that if you mention copyright, they just go to sleep. It's a boring conversation to them. It's because they are not used to it. So let's get as many people used to it as possible. And remember, it's a social issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Ceslause, for that conversation. Like I said earlier, we've also shared, for those of you who will be joining Wikimania, there's a advocacy day 0 that will be happening. Also, after this call, during the post email, I'll send emails about this session where I'll list all the resources and the groups. I'll find all the Telegram links to the Telegram groups so that you can join, so that you can also learn about it. But there's a Wiki Advocacy group which is in the chat already. You can go there. There's a mailing list from the policy team in the foundation that they do share also very important messages on there that we can take note of. So thank you. Yes, the link to the Telegram, I'll get the link for you and then I'll share it in the post event email for everybody. So I think at this point we'll share the Mentimeter to take everybody's opinion about the session, what went well, what didn't, and to help us to improve for the next one. So thank you all for joining, and it will be great to see you fill out the Mentimeter with your opinions about this learning clinic.